am very happy to introduce our Director for Domestic Policy, Anika Forrest. You may know Anika also as the lead lobbyist on migration justice, which she has been doing with us. And I really encourage you to go into the website, FCNL website, and look at her bio. She has an extensive background working on migration issues, racial justice issues, economic issues, housing from the local level around Philadelphia to the national and international level as well. And she is not only an amazing lobbyist, she is a fabulous community-based organizer as well. And the one thing I wanted to read from her bio, because it is a wonderful line about Anika that speaks to who she is the last line of her bio. And it says, as the daughter of immigrants, Anika is unapologetically committed to advancing community-engaged movements to cultivate an equitable, humane, and inclusive future. And I had the joy of getting to see Anika in action in a trip to the border with her that she organized last month. The staff have been doing these wonderful program education trips. And she brought us to see really the full 360 of the issue and the realities that people are living in the policy issues that we're working on here in Washington. At the local level there where we were in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. And so she's just bringing remarkable leadership to our work. And we're very excited to hear the presentation of the Justice Award from Anika.
Thank you, Bridget, for that warm and kind introduction. And greetings, friends. I want to say a special hello and shout out to our friends in Alaska who are also joining us virtually. Every year, the Friends Committee on National Legislation honors a member of Congress with the FCNL Justice Award. This award recognizes an individual who has advanced policies to create a more just society and country, who defends the dignity of all people. Tonight, I'm delighted to present this award to Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska for her commitment to honoring the nation-to-nation relationship between the United States federal government and tribal nations. A longtime champion for several of FCNL's legislative priorities, we specifically want to recognize Senator Murkowski's work on tribal policy issues. As the vice chair of the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, she's a fierce advocate for Indian country. Her leadership has been critical in navigating our country's acknowledgement of and reckoning with its agonizing Indian boarding schools legacy and in charting a path towards reconciliation. Notably, Senator Murkowski is the only Senate Republican to co-sponsor the Truth and Healing Commission on Indian Boarding Schools Policy in the United States Act. She also co-sponsored the National Remembrance Day for Indian Boarding School Children Resolution, calling for the United States to observe September 30th as a day of remembrance for Native American children who died during their forced attendance at Indian boarding schools in the United States. The atrocities of Indian boarding schools should never fall from our collective memory, just as we ought to recognize, honor, and support the survivors of Indian boarding schools, their families, and their communities. Senator Murkowski's leadership extends to the missing and murdered Indigenous people crisis. A study by the National Institute of Justice found that 84% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced intimate partner violence, sexual violence, or stalking in their lifetimes. Equally harrowing, Native American women are trafficked, murdered, and raped at 5 to 10 times the national rate. Without jurisdiction over these crimes, tribes are unable to prosecute non-Native perpetrators of violence against Native women, meaning many who have experienced violence are unable to seek justice. Senator Murkowski has led on the 2022 reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, also known as VAWA, and advocated for the tribal title in VAWA, which expands tribal criminal jurisdiction and establishes an Alaska pilot program to handle the unique jurisdictional needs of Alaska Native villages. Tribal jurisdiction is crucial to addressing the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people. Senator Murkowski is also leading efforts to pass the Family Violence Prevention and Services Improvement Act, or FIPSA, which FCNL is energetically supporting. This bill is the primary federal grant program dedicated to supporting victims of sexual and domestic violence and their children, with tribal provisions key to addressing unparalleled rates of violence in tribal communities. At the heart of FCNL's Native American legislative priorities is the conviction that the United States must uphold its federal trust responsibility to tribes by honoring treaty obligations, protecting and strengthening inherent tribal sovereignty, protecting tribal lands held in trust, and providing for a prosperous future for tribal communities. Senator Murkowski's leadership embodies this commitment. She is a true example of bipartisanship across issue areas, frequently coming to the table to see what both parties can support. And she's not afraid to be only one of few, or even the only Republican to do so, risking her political capital to advance what is right for Alaska, tribal nations, and the people of the United States. Senator Murkowski, thank you for all you have accomplished and for your continued commitment to truth, healing, justice, and honoring the federal government's responsibility to tribal nations and Indigenous people. Unfortunately, the senator couldn't be with us tonight, but we will be presenting this office to her in her office. And now I want to turn your attentions to a video remark from Senator Murkowski. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you to the Friends Committee on National Legislation for all that you do. I am very honored to receive this year's Justice Award as we all work together to advance policies that create a more just society and recognize the dignity of all people. Since first coming to the Senate, one of my top priorities has been addressing the public safety crisis in Native communities, as well as protecting the most vulnerable. I took heart to the tragic stories from tribal leaders, from advocates, and the loved ones of missing or murdered Indigenous people, and I heard their calls for action. The disproportionate rates of violent crime in cases of missing and murdered Native people are truly unconscionable. And I'm proud to have worked with tribal advocates to pass new laws and fund new programs that will hopefully turn the tide in this crisis. We also empowered tribes in Alaska and across the nation to better protect their communities, especially the most vulnerable, through passage of the Violence Against Women Act of 2020. I worked with friends across the aisle to draft a strong tribal title of the bill. I'm really looking forward to its implementation. It's just now getting off the ground, so much to look forward to there. We also passed Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act, which promote governmental coordination, improve data and reporting, and include Native people in advancing additional solutions to the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous people. Federal resources are also so critical, so I've used my position on Interior Appropriations to include funding to address MMIP and support tribal justice systems, including those that are located in PL 280 states. Every person, whether they live on a reservation, in a rural Alaska Native village, or in an urban Indian community, deserves safety and access to justice. So thanks to FCNL for supporting these policy initiatives through partnership with Native leaders and those of us here in Congress. It is with the help of advocates like you that we have been able to see through such significant legislation. We all know that we have more to do, including addressing the tragic legacy of Indian boarding schools, so I'm very glad that FCNL will be there to support us as we continue that work. So again, thank you very much for this recognition. Take care. Be well.